colleague Tucker Bennett, and you could introduce yourself, Tucker, and then we just ask our participants to introduce themselves too.
Sure. My name's Tucker Beckett. I'm a senior planner here at WestCOG.
And Ken,
I'm Ken Ewer, New Fairfield Zoning Commission alternate.
okay, yeah, and Mr. T.
Hi, Thomas Kowalauskas, member of New Fairfield Zoning Commission.
Okay, great. Well, I guess we can begin, Tucker. And today we're talking about backyard chicken coops, zoning strategies for keeping hens and roosters in Connecticut. So as soon as we get up, I'll have our slides. So as I mentioned, my name is Charles Vidich, and I'm the Senior Project Manager at Western Connecticut Council of Governments. And of course, I mentioned that joined by my colleague Tucker Beckett, Senior Planner at WestCOG. Today, we will review zoning strategies for keeping hens and roosters in backyard chicken coops. This training course reviews where backyard chickens are allowed, how they are regulated, some of the environmental neighborhood concerns, and recommended best practices. The goal of this presentation is to familiarize you with the zoning approaches to managing backyard chickens consistent with public health, environmental protection, and neighborhood concerns that are responsibilities you have as a planning and zoning commission member or member of a zoning board of appeal. This 1-hour training session fulfills your requirement to receive at least one of the 4 hours of training relevant to your role as a planning and a zoning commission or ZBA member every 4 years. If your term is longer than 4 years, then you must receive the required training during the term of your service on the commission. This training is the first to provide a statewide analysis of current backyard chicken zoning practices based on a very comprehensive study by WestCOG. So we're excited about giving it. So why did chickens become so popular? According to the American Pet Products Association 25-26 survey, they found that approximately 11 million US households have backyard chickens, representing significant growth over the past few years. The interest in backyard chickens reflects a variety of concerns, including the rising price of eggs and interest in do-it-yourself ways of food production. Chickens have long been a part of Connecticut farming. However, the focus of this presentation is on the non-commercial chicken practices, which are primarily geared toward egg production for homeowner use. So here we have our overview of the items that we will go over, the 10 key items that we'll deal with today. And we're dealing with how chickens are regulated, where they are allowed, rooster considerations, manure management, how many chickens should be allowed, safety and predator considerations. And we will also review siting considerations, expert guidance, and avian disease issues, and then conclude with some recommendations and conclusions relevant to zoning commissions. So we can go to the next slide, and we'll start with current zoning practices across Connecticut. So how are they being regulated? If you go to the next slide, only 66% of Connecticut's zoning commissions allow backyard chickens for non-commercial purposes. Those that do not address this issue may very well tolerate their existence. For example, 48% of municipalities that do not allow backyard chickens are rural in character. It would not be surprising that backyard chickens are not considered worthy of zoning oversight in these areas. And I should mention, one town that I know has no regulations, yet has 5 backyard chicken operations, which actually have signs where they sell chickens. So we know there's more going on than meets the eye of the zoning commissions, or even ourselves in some cases. And we can go on to the next slide. So backyard chickens are primarily an as-of-right use in Connecticut, and not surprisingly, 67% approve them in that way as a matter of right. However, those that require zoning permits, conditional permits, site plan, or special permits tend to be in suburban areas of the state where concerns with neighborhood impacts are more of a concern. That's basically, as you'll see, the overall tendency is to treat them as of right. And the next less onerous way is, of course, the zoning permit. And this is, of course, across all the 169 towns, of which only 111 have regulations. So we can go to the next slide. So the minimum lot for backyard chickens generally mirrors the current lot size requirements in the municipalities that permit them. There are some exceptions to that rule. Several municipalities have set minimum lot size for backyard chickens based on having sufficient space in the backyard. That would be, I believe, Berlin that has done that. And as a result, the standard really that is being used in terms of practice is looking at whether there's a residential zone. Generally, you'll see in the next slide, half-acre lots are normally where we see this happening. But there are standards emerging, at least in the poultry industry, of what's an acceptable amount of minimum space for the enclosure of chickens. And we'll talk about that later. And we can go to the next slide. Now, this shows you of the 111 municipalities that regulate them, under 20,000 square feet, which is roughly a half acre, to half acre to 1 acre, which is 43,560 square feet. Those two represent 72% of all the municipalities. So there is a great emphasis on smaller lot regulation, and which is quite natural because those are the instances where the concerns with noise from roosters or manure from chickens may be a neighbor consideration. So as you can see here, of course, we have lots from all different sizes. And one of the reasons, as we'll get into, is because often the minimum lot size is de facto the minimum space that most municipalities use to establish whether you can have a chicken or not, based on what you see in this table. You can go to the next slide. So as one might assume, most zoning commissions allow backyard chickens in residential zones. But what is surprising is that backyard chickens are allowed in commercial industrial zones as well. Typically, backyard chickens are allowed in all residential zones for municipalities that allow them. So if there's 5 residential zones in a community, those 5 residential zones are allowing them in general practice. There are some exceptions, but that's the general practice. But we have extremes. At one extreme, 11 towns only allow them in one zone, and those are often towns that only have one residential zone in their municipality. And there are plenty of towns like that in Connecticut. Not a lot, but some. At the other extreme, 6 towns allow them in 10 or more zones, and those would be like Groton, North Branford, Norwich, Southbury, Stafford, and Stonington, largely because those municipalities have a complete range of lot sizes, as well as other commercial industrial uses. And that's one of the reasons you see that. So when you get down to it, it's an enormous number of zones in Connecticut that allow for the backyard chickens. And now we'll go on to the next section, which is where are chickens allowed? And my colleague, Tucker Beckett, will take it from here.
Thanks, Charlie. So now we're going to review where chickens are allowed on individual lots. So first off, are backyard chickens really kept in the backyard? To start, only about a third of zoning commissions in Connecticut specify that they must be located in the backyard of a property. The remaining municipalities require them to simply be within property line setbacks, or they haven't explicitly established where they're supposed to be placed within a lot. As a practical matter, most chicken coops end up being located in side or rear lots, even if zoning regulations are silent on a preferred location. Management of roosters is understandably often the most scrutinized aspect of municipal zoning regulations. Should roosters be allowed? And if so, how should they be regulated? Roosters are understandably treated differently than hens because they they make a lot of noise, and that is a concern on smaller lots. It might be surprising to learn that 48 municipalities allow roosters. That's 43% of those not regulating backyard chickens. To be more precise, these 48 municipalities don't explicitly prohibit roosters. It wouldn't be surprising for a zoning commission to overlook the issues associated with roosters in more rural areas of Connecticut where property rights and chickens are closely aligned. There are two main approaches among those that have chosen to regulate roosters. One approach is to prohibit them altogether in all zones. 34 municipalities have taken that route. In contrast, 29 municipalities allow roosters, but only on larger lots. Generally, they'll set a threshold of at least 3 acres or like at least 5 acres. It's notable, though, that this isn't a wholly effective use of performance zoning, since the morning crow of a rooster can't be effectively contained within a 3 or 5 acre lot. A closer look at roosters finds that rooster concerns vary with urban density, and that urbanized municipalities are more concerned with rooster noise than the suburbs. 62% of urbanized areas prohibit roosters altogether, in contrast with 57% of the suburbs and 44% of the rural areas that share this concern. And we've laid this out spatially to kind of give a sense of what this looks like across the state. So you can see that generally roosters are permitted in more rural municipalities and restricted in the urban ones, although there are certainly notable exceptions, as you can see on this map. So next, we're going to move into another area of concern with chickens, which is the management of manure. Despite the potential environmental impacts of chicken manure, it is not really a common concern for zoning commissions. Only 73% of the municipalities that regulate backyard chickens do not address it at all. This is an issue of particular concern when manure is stored near watercourses, wells, or above septic system leaching fields, where contamination is an issue. For some municipalities, though, a smaller group of zoning commissions have recognized potential environmental concerns with manure stored or left near rivers and streams, near wells, or too close to a neighbor's property. Only 27 municipalities require chicken coops to be odor-free and sanitary. In contrast, 30 municipalities have a range of setback standards, as shown in this table here. Keeping manure away from watercourses, wells, and neighboring dwelling units should be a high priority. Manure releases phosphorus and nitrogen, which can degrade the water quality of streams and rivers, and eventually ends up contributing to the water quality of Long Island Sound. At the very least, an 100-foot riparian setback for properly contained manure is a recommended best practice to avoid the degradation of Connecticut's watercourses. So, important question, how many chickens are too many? And for this one, I'm going to turn it back over to Charlie.
Okay, thanks, Tucker. There are three approaches that taken to determining how many chickens is too many. 48 zoning commissions, that's 43% of all of the towns with these types of regulations, have a fixed number of chickens allowed regardless of the lot size or location. The second approach is based on the use of the step function, where the number of chickens varies with the amount of land available to house and fence the chickens. This approach is used by 47 zoning commissions, that's roughly 42%, and varies widely in terms of the incremental increase in chickens allowed with each increment of land area. As you can see here, Brookfield has 6 birds on lots that are under 40,000 square feet and 50 for each additional 40,000 square feet. Chaplin has 10 birds for lots under a half acre, up to 5 more for each 1/4 acre. So everyone's come up with their little formulas here. And you wonder where the science is on this, but this is what is emerging. At least the principle here is to say you need more land if you have more chickens. And what that actually represents in terms of practical science is another matter which we'll discuss later. But you'll see that these are examples of the municipalities that use this step function. So if you're in a town that has a 1 acre lot, but a requirement for that zone, but you happen to have a 2 acre parcel within the 1 acre zone. Well, in the case of Brookfield, for example, you would then have more than the basic minimum 6 birds. You'd have 12 birds. And so that gives you an example of how that system works. Many of those using the step function have also adopted the concept of the animal unit, which is designed to normalize the impacts of various types of livestock on specific, based on a specific lot size. For example, using the animal unit concept, Rocky Hill indicates that a 500-pound cow, 2 sheep of a mature weight between 30 and 500 pounds, and then 10 hens or rabbits that weigh less than 30 pounds are all considered one animal unit. So this approach of an animal unit is used by a number of municipalities, and it basically is taking a broader approach to non-commercial livestock that goes beyond chickens. It's not that we're talking about chickens here, but since a number of municipalities which use the step function have decided to deal with this as a bigger issue, you get into the animal unit concept, which is why you see these basic arrangements for the Brookfield, Chaplin, Enfield, Bolton, and Avon. A number of them also then will have animal units in there where you can have a mixture of sheep and poultry, for example, based on an animal unit standard of 1 acre. So that's another issue, which is in a sense a sideline to what we're doing. And of course, there's 16 municipalities that have no size limits whatsoever. And I dare say that could be because they hadn't really thought it through, or it could be for other reasons. We don't really have the crystal ball on why that happened, but that's the way it is. So we can go to the next slide. So the step function raises a question: is it truly non-commercial when you have large numbers of chickens? Because if you have in the order of 6 to 9 chickens, you can have in the order of 12, a dozen eggs a day coming out. If you're looking at a personal use of eggs, you have to have a pretty darn big family to be eating 12 eggs a day if there's only 2 or 3 people in your family, or you're really loading up on the egg protein. But of course, there is the issue that people can actually swap as opposed to commercially sell their eggs. In other words, they could be giving them to their neighbors, and there's all these other things that can go on. But you can see here what kind of ranges that you have with the step function. And of course, one of the things that you see here, 34 municipalities that allow for more than 20 chickens enable egg production, which really is, I would say, beyond home consumption. Whether it's actually for commercial purposes is a $64 question. There are these places, by the way, are primarily found in the suburbs. These municipalities do not prohibit the sale of eggs. And of course, the question of whether it's for sale is a question of whether it's commercial. And commercial production of eggs is really not what this whole presentation is about. So there is a legal issue of how far backyard egg production is going from personal use to commercial use. It's a vague area, and it isn't well defined even by the law, by saying that if you have a certain number of eggs produced, then you're in the business. if you're in the high intense poultry production where you have 20,000 eggs, you certainly are in the commercial business. That's already known in the law. But anything less than that is a gray area. So, but I will say, in contrast to Groton, Groton has a different approach. They actually explicitly allow the sale of produce on the lot as an accessory use with an administrator's site plan, including specific requirements for parking, signage, farm stand size, and other matters. However, Groton limits the maximum number of hens to 10, so it represents a distinctly low-key commercial use. And even then, even though that's the only one of the 111 towns that has explicitly put in this provision, arguably, it does raise issues to have that provision in the Groton regulations, particularly as we'll get into a public act that passed in 2023 that raises higher levels of responsibility for those in this business. So we can go to the next slide. So what happens when a flock of chicken crosses the road? That's the old classic question, but in a different context. Because here, as you can go to the next slide, what we're really talking about is what happens when you have free-range chickens. 39% of municipalities allow free-range chickens. Whether or not they intended to do that, the issue is when a municipality does not have a requirement for a fence enclosure, arguably that means that a homeowner does not have to fence them by regulation. Whether they actually fence them is another matter. They probably are fencing them, but it isn't necessarily so. There are plenty of people who like the idea of free-range chickens, and it's actually something that many people think makes for a healthier chicken and healthier eggs. So there is a reason for this, but it also does raise issues of predators and whether or not chickens get run over by crossing the road, which is, of course, a liability for the chickens as well as the owners of those chickens. So that's something to think about. Go on to the next slide. So free-range chickens are common in suburbs and rural areas of Connecticut. 83% of the municipalities allowing free-range chickens are suburban or rural in character. It is not clear if zoning commissions of rural suburban municipalities have overlooked the need to contain the chickens in the backyard, or simply did not consider it an issue that rises to the level of public health, safety, or the general welfare. Because fundamentally, that is the underlying principle. If there is no public health, safety, or general welfare concern, a commission can say, we don't think we need to get involved with this. The greater the density, the more urban in areas, the more likely there is that concern, though, for a variety of reasons. So that is obviously based on current practice across Connecticut, some flexibility in how local commissions are handling this. So we can go to the next slide. So there are a range of predators that raise public safety concerns, including foxes, raccoons, bobcats, and others, to name a few. But fundamentally, poultry production and the public good is an important underlying principle of why this presentation is being given. Poultry protection does raise issues that affect the public good in general and neighborhood compatibility specifically. Inadequate enclosures for chickens, along with poor manure management, can attract predators, which in turn affects those living nearby. Controlling predators is in the public interest, especially with loud roosters and poorly contained chicken manure. Those are two issues right there that become more and more significant the more suburban and urban a municipality is with respect to chickens. So as we have here, fully enclosed enclosures, not only the chicken coop, but the enclosure that allows them to be outdoors, which they need a pasture. And then, of course, if they're not adequately protected, not only do predators come, but predators are then a nuisance for the neighbors as well, because they then come into that general area. It's not just a nuisance for the owner of the chickens. So there is a public interest in controlling predators, odors, and loud noises. And we can go to the next slide, and I believe that will be, isn't that you?
Yep.
Tucker?
Yep. I'll take over for a little bit.
Okay.
With the issue of how much poultry protection is enough. So proper collection and containment of manure reduces the presence of predators, as we've established. However, other factors such as securely contained chicken food are also important. Only 30 municipalities have addressed manure setbacks, manure odor standards, offsite disposal, and secure containment of chicken feed to discourage predators. And that's a pretty small proportion of the overall number of towns as zoned for chickens. As a best practice, all zoning commissions should consider these concepts. Circling back around, revisiting the issue of siting, where should a chicken coop be located? Only a handful of zoning commissions have taken into consideration the appropriate location for a chicken coop and the chicken pen. We recommend here 5 siting considerations, which are intended to ensure backyard chickens don't create environmental issues or neighborhood conflicts. These are, is the site at least 100 feet from wetlands or watercourses? Is it at least 75 feet down gradient from a dug or drilled well? Is it free of steep slopes or shallow to bedrock? Is it outside of the septic system leaching field? Or is it located in the rear of a property behind the principal dwelling? Many of these concerns are unique to rural and suburban areas that operate within the septic system leaching fields or that have drilled or dug wells, and where the terrain also might not be as flat. Keeping chickens on steep slopes raises the potential for increased runoff, which can lead to faster discharge of chicken manure downgrade, whether to rivers or streams or just onto neighboring properties. Another issue is space. There are only a limited number of municipalities that have established minimum space requirements for hens in a hen house. Similarly, there are even fewer that have established minimum open space required for chickens on a per bird basis for them to roam. One approach that does not involve additional regulation is to reference best practices for chicken coop sizes based on the number of chickens planned. Occupancy recommendations can be a useful means of increasing homeowner understanding of the health benefits of providing the proper amount of space in the chicken coop and pasture area. And this is where we come to a reliance on guidance from experts. Referring to state or federal guidance in zoning policies ends up being the exception rather than the rule. But it's valuable to have input from poultry experts before building a chicken coop or a backyard enclosure. Only 32 zoning commissions have cited relevant Connecticut Department of Health, Department of Agriculture, or DEEP resources in their policies. Arguably more important than including references to guidance from these agencies is ensuring access to public-facing resources, such as fact sheets, checklists. They can aid homeowners who are planning to have backyard chickens, things that they can refer to. We referenced some of these materials at the end of this presentation. Perhaps one of the most important statutory regulations that applies to backyard chicken owners is the recently enacted Public Act 23-184 from 2023, which establishes certain standards for the sale of eggs by non-commercial chicken owners. It requires eggs to be stored at no greater than 45 degrees Fahrenheit, requires proper labeling, including the producer's name, and a few other items shown in the excerpt above. Well, this law governs the sale of eggs by those exempted from commercial poultry regulations. Its aim is to ensure public health measures are applied to all those who have a role in the distribution and sale of eggs in the non-commercial sphere. An important question for local zoning officials here. Are chickens livestock? According to the general statutes, livestock does include poultry. The word including as shown in the text above is a means to simplify the application of the definitions for agriculture and farming. Livestock is normally associated with animals, and birds are considered part of the animal kingdom. So that's it as far as the state is concerned. So another important question is, can a zoning commission have its own definition of what constitutes a farm? Under Section 101Q, the Connecticut General Statutes have set a definition for farms. That definition includes the caveat that nothing herein shall restrict the power of a local zoning authority under Chapter 124. In effect, what this means is that zoning commissions can set additional definitions or additional criteria for farms to address the broader concerns and conflicts that can emerge between farming and other land uses. One of the more common modifications is to limit the size of a farm, like the minimum size for a lot to be considered a farm based on a specified number of acres. Often municipalities that allow for larger maximum flock sizes through a step function will use this alternative definition. 26 of the 35 zoning commissions that use the step function, as described earlier, have defined a farm to be at least 3 or 5 acres. The other 12 municipalities that do not specify the size of a farm have definitions that are either identical to those set forth in the general statutes or address issues unique to their municipality, such as like urban farming, for example. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Charlie to talk about chickens and avian disease.
Okay. Well, thanks, Tucker. And we can go right into the next slide here. It's important to recognize that backyard chickens are vulnerable to avian diseases, just as commercially managed chickens are. Recent avian disease outbreaks at non-commercial backyard chickens and even pet chickens suggest the importance of maintaining the health of flocks housed in the backyard. These are 2 news releases that the Connecticut Department of Agriculture released, one in August, just last month, and the other one 3 years ago. But you can see the one in 2025, the highly pathogenic avian influenza H5N1 was detected in New London County backyard flock. And I'll just read it. The Department of Agriculture advises that highly pathogenic avian influenza or bird flu was confirmed in a backyard flock located in New London on Wednesday, January 15th of this year. The backyard flock, consisting of chickens, ducks, and peacocks, were family pets, not commercial poultry, and had close contact with wild waterfowl in a nearby pond. So it's obvious that commercial poultry is the most vulnerable to avian flu, but these examples here indicate that there is no exemption just because we're non-commercial or even as pets. So this is the significance, because a pandemic, it only takes one place to trigger something like this. And obviously this raised the concern largely because over the last couple of years, we've all been involved with various flus. In this case, it was COVID-19, which is a similar viral transmitted disease, zoonotic in nature, which means it went from an animal, or in this case, birds, to humans, in the case of avian. But in the case of COVID-19, there's still speculation as to how that happened. In any case, this does raise the interest level in paying attention to some details that we'll get into. You can go to the next slide. Yep. So a result of some of the things that have happened recently, the U.S. Department of Agriculture has put together a checklist, a biosecurity checklist for backyard chicken keepers. And basically this checklist, which is relatively simple, emphasizes the importance of not having other people who are not caretakers for the chickens, visitors or other people, to come in and get exposed to the chickens, or to expose the chickens themselves to something we bring in when we're not the keepers of the chickens. So this is a matter of just keeping good housekeeping practices on the part of the homeowner who has chickens. And this is a summary, essentially, of what the U.S. Department of Agriculture biosecurity checklist that has recently been put out to just make sure the homeowner is aware that there are issues with having people coming and going and being exposed, because who's to know whether that person has something that's exposing to the chickens or vice versa, or whether those chickens are being exposed because of wildlife that is in the area. One of the other reasons for having enclosures, other than the concern about predators and getting run over, having chickens run over on the highway, is that having enclosures does reduce the risk of pathogen transmission, which can happen when they're exposed to other wildlife. So you can go on to the next slide. So now we'll just conclude with three slides that summarize what we've learned today. What we've learned is that backyard chickens are a popular idea in Connecticut. We have also learned that we have opportunities to improve manure management. In some cases, what constitutes non-commercial application of backyard chickens may have commercial levels of egg production that may suggest the need to better address manure management and the allowance of roosters, as well as making sure that they meet the 2023 law, which establishes certain public health responsibilities for the temperature controls for eggs at 45 degrees or less Fahrenheit. One other point is only 34% of zoning commissions regulate roosters. This issue is an urban concern that may also be of concern in smaller lot sizes in the suburbs as well. And it's not always clear that commissions have understood the consequences of allowing roosters when allowing chickens as a backyard. Hopefully that is an issue that most people understand, but it's not always clear based on the fact that there are a goodly number that allow them, even in areas which are urban in nature. That's an interesting point, and it's hard to know whether this is a question of just not thinking it through, or whether that was a conscious decision on the part of certain municipalities in urban areas to do so. You'll notice that when you look at some of the towns that have on that map that have different standards than you might expect. You can go to the next slide. So to encourage greater adoption of backyard chickens, the use of special permits and site plan approvals should be used sparingly. Alternatives to these permit procedures include improved homeowner training, education, and technical assistance when a backyard chicken application is received. In many ways, it's not the special permit or the site plan that we really need when there's concerns like this. It's really more the technical assistance. For example, let's just take the driver ed program. Nobody goes out and drives a vehicle without a license. Of course, people do that. We know that. But having driver training is a prerequisite for getting a license. And in some ways, one of the things that does help, and we're working with Yukon Clear, the Center for Land Use Education there, with the idea that more education is probably as important or more important than the actual regulatory strategy that's being used. Second, the fencing needs to be explicitly included in any zoning regulation governing backyard chickens. This is not only an important means of protecting chickens from predators, but ensures the flock doesn't cross the neighboring property or get hit when it crosses the street. Or, as I mentioned earlier, it's a protection also from avian flu when you have better control over the flock. For the sake of the health of the flock, providing minimum standards for space needed for birds in the coop and birds in the pasture is important. Lack of adequate space affects the health of the flock. And we have included in a previous slide that Tucker went over there are standards that exist out there, and they're referenced at the end of our presentation. Because if they're too crowded, that does create some issues with the flock, not only from a health point of view, but even the kind of fighting that can go on with the chickens. So there are some benefits to have the expert advice on those issues. And we can go to the next slide. So not that one, just the previous. So the biosecurity is not complicated, but is quite important if we wish to eliminate the spread of avian disease. Homeowners may not be aware of the 2023 law that requires eggs to be kept at a specific temperature and to be kept clean. The best way that zoning commissions can assist in this arena is by referencing these requirements. Some zoning commissions have set minimum acreage standards to be called a farm. There's no similar guidance concerning how much land is needed for each chicken or flock of chickens to lead a healthy life in the backyard. As we have learned, the amount of land needed to have a backyard chickens is a function of existing minimum lot sizes in each municipality. Only a few municipalities have considered the space requirements of the flock, but those are the municipalities that have actually had the most technical assistance from experts or use of regulations or fact sheets from the Department of Agriculture. And those are actually extremely valuable. And if you go to the next slide, we reference some of these resources. Tucker, are you?
Yep.
Yeah, okay. So these resources and the embedded links provide important information on how to manage backyard chickens, which may be useful when your commission reviews or updates its backyard chicken regulations or considers establishing such regulations. I'd say the first couple are extremely valuable. 10 tips for new poultry owners promoting health flocks and families. Yukon Extension Service, small and backyard poultry is also good. How to avoid chicken feed storage mistakes, and small allowances in housing for small backyard poultry flocks are all excellent guidance documents that I think can be very useful. And some municipalities have actually referenced some of these documents, but they're actually very useful because a lot of this gets down to public education. And then there's the one, Yukon Clear, permitting and regulating backyard chickens in Connecticut from a One Health perspective. That will be released within the next 30 days. We've been working with Yukon Clear on this presentation, and that will be very valuable as well. In fact, we'll be working with them when they release their document dealing with backyard chickens, because we've been collaborating with Yukon Clear on the work that you're hearing today. So with that, I guess we can open up for a few minutes of questions, if there are questions from either one of you. If you have any, we'd be delighted to chat. And also, we'd be delighted to know your interest in chickens since you've listened to us for 45 minutes. You're mute. You're on mute. Can you unmute there, Ken? Or
Sorry.
yeah.
Have you come across any incidents of like chicken abuse or hoarding? You know, like sometimes will happen with cats or dogs. And is that something that's ever happened? Is it?
Well, yes, a chicken abuse can happen for sure. That happens particularly if you're getting into too many chickens in a confined space. I've seen some of these coops that have been made, which are designed for 10 chickens, but they have 15 chickens in it. And that can lead to, cannibalism amongst the chickens, for one. That's one issue. But when you say hoarding, what do you mean by hoarding?
Well, just excessive numbers, like, the property is overrun by chickens. Like you'll sometimes see a house, and obviously a different situation as far as housing goes, but just all over the property to the point where it's unhealthy or unsafe in some way.
Yes, I have seen some. And basically, one of the issues happens when they're not fenced in. because the manure can be spread all over your lawn and or even walkways and terraces. And then you can have children that are walking through the manure and it comes into your house. And I know of an instance of this case, and it's ghastly, really, what happens. So confining them is a very important thing. It doesn't mean that you don't have a pasture. It's just it's a confined pasture. But when they're free range, unless your house is an enormous distance away from the free range area, there's all kinds of bacteria and pathogens that can be transmitted just by stepping into the manure, especially if you have children. This is where the biggest issue is with children, because they don't know what they're stepping in many cases.
True, it's true.
Ken, do you have any examples that you've run into or no?
No. No. My daughter and her grandchildren and my grandchildren have a chicken coop,
Yeah,
and I think the big issue is more of a family issue, like who's taking care of the chickens, who's not taking care of the chickens, and it becomes like, it's your dog, your dog, it's your chickens, and you're supposed to do it. So, I mean, they stay on top of it, but it's not. It's not easy, there a lot of times my wife will step in and
yeah,
just see when's the last time they were fed, which is not really the issues here, but
yeah,
that's the only like personal experience that I've had.
yeah. Well, my one of my sons has a chicken coop. In fact, he's a builder too. So he's built for about 3 different neighbors. He's built chicken coops, and I've discussed some of these issues with him. Uh, it is an issue. Uh, One of the things, once you have a chicken or a chicken coop with, I guess he has about 9 chickens, you can't just go away for a vacation for a week. Somebody's got to take care of those chickens. So the
Yeah,
idea that
that's me.
but
Yeah.
you're the one, Ken, that has to stick around.
I'm the chicken tender, myself and my wife,
Yeah,
when they go away. But I get it.
yeah, that's what ends up happening. It is a responsibility, and not everybody remembers that. Says, "Oh my God, who's going to take care of the chickens? We're going to San Diego for a week or something." And yeah, no, that is an issue. Yeah, there's a lot of responsibilities, and one of the things is the manure management part of it. Even if you don't let them free range, you still have a manure issue to deal with. Whether it's in the pasture or in the coop, there's always there's a cleaning part of it, obviously.
Yeah. Am I wrong in just listening to you is that there's a certain reluctance to manage or supervise, from a zoning perspective or a zoning enforcement agent perspective on an annual basis or whatever periodic basis to make sure that things are sanitary and
Well, I think in a world in which we had infinite time and resources, they might be able to do it. But the challenge is, towns, have zoning enforcement officers that are busy already with other issues that are probably higher on their priority list. And so getting to the issue of chicken violations generally is going to happen because there's a rooster or there's manure that's spreading from one neighbor's house, the rooster site, to the down gradient neighbor, or even if it isn't going manure that way, the smell might be there. So a lot of these things get triggered by a neighbor as opposed to the homeowner or even the zoning enforcement officer. Now, in an ideal world, yeah, the zoning enforcement officer should look to see that things are going on, but it's just a question of workload in many respects. I think that's the real challenge we face across all of Connecticut on virtually any zoning issue is, I don't know of any zoning commission that has more than one zoning enforcement officer. If we're lucky, just we have one. In many towns, we have one zoning enforcement officer working for multiple towns just because they share costs. So it is a challenge in that regard to stay up with it. But I think that what I would say is rather than looking at the tail end where the problem has already happened, to the extent that there's like I said with the driver's license analogy, if when somebody comes in and they want to do a chicken coop, even if it's as a matter of right, if you can give somebody a fact sheet like what UConn is putting together, that can be extremely helpful, because then all of a sudden, I know, even talking to my son who has one, and then his spouse, is that they weren't really aware of some of these issues, particularly this one about 45-degree temperature or less for the keeping of eggs. And I don't think anyone in Connecticut is really up to speed on this, by and large, because that was only passed 2 years ago. And before that, there were no rules about temperature controls for backyard chickens. So it is a whole new thing. And it's obviously not a zoning enforcement officer's rule. It's a state rule. So it's not really technically one that falls within the purview of zoning. But on the other hand, it is a public health concept, and it's certainly more likely person to be able to see things is going to be the zoning enforcement officer, not somebody in Hartford who is not aware of what's going on across the state of Connecticut. So it is a challenge in that regard.
Maybe it becomes more of a, or maybe some kind of a coalition with zoning and department and health department, maybe when it comes to things like that.
It's a very good point. I think to the extent that both the health department or the health district, depending upon the scenario, are both aware of these overlapping jurisdictions, I think that's a very valuable thing, because then there's a cooperation element.
Yep.
And Mr. T, I forgot your first name, but
Thomas, it's Thomas.
oh, Thomas, yes.
Yeah, thank you. The information was very informative in regards to, we did do a chicken regulation in our town a few years back, and we don't allow roosters. But I'm glad you guys mentioned about the 100 feet from a water source.
Yeah, it was excellent.
75 feet from a well or septic, because that might be something that we should add and have, because we are a lake community, and we do have different streams and brooks and stuff that feed into the lake.
Yeah. Yeah, and if
so
you're
that
going
is-
to, yeah,
I'm
go ahead.
sorry. No, so that information is really, that's good for us to know.
And one thing to follow up on that, based on your interest there, East Windsor, Connecticut, is probably got the best regulation on backyard chickens with regard to those issues. I know, I can just tell by the way they wrote their regulations that they had some people involved that knew what they were doing. I highly recommend looking, if you're looking at just an example of a good regulation on that issue, the East Windsor one is right there to look at. It's probably the most sophisticated of the ones I've seen across the 111 towns.
No, that's a great recommendation. Just to make a note of, for the zoning officer, we have over 5,400 homes in town. So yes, having one zoning officer is very challenging with dealing with different issues. It's really not enough. But it's interesting to hear that. I guess that's how most towns are, especially if a town were sharing. I don't know how you get anything done. It really is.
Well, yeah, the big issue there is really financing. A lot of towns are so strapped on the finances that the only way they can afford to do something like this is to have them part-time. I know a number of towns that are doing that, both up in Northwest and Northeast Connecticut. They just don't have the funds to do full-time ZEO work, zoning enforcement.
Right. Well, I know, but it's hard, when things are, people do things they're not supposed to do, or there's issues, it's kind of it's trying to figure out what's the most pressing or important to, it's like you're triaging constantly. what to work on, and what things then you kind of overlook, due to that.
Yeah. Well, you raised a good point about the water protection issues, and I think in Western Connecticut, it is a real high priority, like it is in East Windsor, just because we have an enormous amount of public water supply, watershed land. That's one part of it, and the other is, our lakes, that even if they're not being used for drinking water, we don't want to degrade them. You get these cyanobacteria that come in. You can have the eutrophication, which basically means you're depleting the oxygen supply of the lake, and it really deadens the water, kills the fish and what have you.
Yes, we're very conscious here, about the quality of our lake, because our community is a lake community. I mean, we have a lot of full-time people, but I mean, that's what draws a lot of people, during the summer to our community. And, so water quality, even though it's not being drunk, from that lake, is important.
Yeah, no, that's true. Anything else? Anybody? Tucker, anything you wanted to bring up too? You're on mute. You're on mute, Tucker.
No, I think that just about covers it.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you guys for taking the time to be here today. And this
Thank you very much.
presentation and all the materials will be posted on our website alongside all of our other commissioner trainings.
Okay,
Now, if they
thank
go
you.
into it though, Tucker, when they see it, can they actually, when they see the presentation, can they click on the embedded link in the presentation, or is that not possible?
Yes, they should be able to,
Okay.
and access the notes as well.
Okay. Well, that's
Thank
good
you
to
very
hear.
much. Very informative. I'm very appreciative. The water part of it is very interesting. Like Thomas said, to our community where there's water all over the place, it's always a concern. And something that certainly I've never thought about, chickens and water, but it's great. It's a great point.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks
Well,
again.
okay. Yeah.
All right. Have a good
Nice
evening.
chatting. And
too.
you
Yeah.
too.
Take
Thanks so
care.
much. Okay.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Okay. Yep. Bye-bye.